He covers the Browns for the Chronicle-Telegram, brownzone.com, where you can read all of his work. He's Mr. Scott Petrak. Hello, my friend. How are you?
What's up, Scott?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
We are also well. Let's start with this and help me look at this from the positive side, just because I'd rather be positive than be negative. The Browns have second interviews lined up right now with 6 candidates. Tell me it's because they know exactly what they're trying to do and looking for an offensive coordinator for a defensive-minded head coach, as opposed to they're throwing anything up at the wall and hoping it sticks by interviewing 6 different guys a second time with 6 very different backgrounds.
Yeah, I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, guys. Just because the candidates are so diverse from background, right? It's not all offensive coordinators. There's defensive guys in there.
Young guys, old guys.
Right, that would replace Jim Schwartz. So it's not about just, hey, Jim Schwartz, and you find a coordinator to go with Jim Schwartz, or you find an offensive mind and pair him with Jim Schwartz if Jim Schwartz stays as a defensive coordinator. So I think it's bigger than that. I believe they have a plan, but I do think when you bring back 6 candidates for second interviews, it feels more wide open than maybe I thought it would be in round 2.
That's fair. Yep.
It seems like a lot of people are also leaning the Jim Schwartz direction when it comes to this, and that some of these other interviews may be for ancillary pieces under Jim Schwartz. Do you believe that might be the case as well with these interviews?
Well, here's what I think. That I do think it's leaning to some degree to Jim Schwartz. And I've thought that when we've talked about it since the firing, and I've thought that since Kevin Stefanski was fired, that Jim Schwartz had a really good chance to stick as a head coach. But I don't think if you break down the other candidates, I think Todd Monken could fit with Jim Schwartz. Now, he also might have the opportunity to go to the Giants and stay with John Harbaugh and be the coordinator there. So I don't know if that's a guarantee, but I could see those 2 guys working together. The same with Nate Scheelhaase, right? Young guy. It would be a promotion from the Rams pass game coordinator to offensive coordinator. I could see those 2 guys working together. But, Grant Udinski's already a coordinator with the Jaguars. And it's, kind of a parallel move that, yeah, he would get a chance to call plays, but the Jaguars would not have to let him leave to do that. Jesse Minter is a defensive coordinator, so that does not fit with Jim Schwartz. So I think you can say it with a couple of candidates and look and go, okay, that kind of fits, but I don't think it fits with all of them.
What would a Jim Schwartz Cleveland Browns team look like, in your estimation?
Yeah, Myles Garrett got that question right at the end of the season, and he said it would be, I'm trying to think, disciplined, and I don't know if it's engaged. I'm going to try to find that quote because I used it the other day. And I think that's true. I think there's an energy that comes with the Jim Schwartz team. I think there's a swagger. I know that there's a swagger that comes with Schwartz, right? Just the way he carries himself, the way the defense has carried itself in his 3 years with them, it's obvious, and he promotes that. And, I remember people used to get so mad at, Greg Newsome the second for dancing after any kind of play. Well, that's the kind of thing Jim promotes. Like, he wants that from his team. So I think that would come across. And when you're contrasting him with what a Kevin Stefanski team looked like, I think those would be an obvious distinction, right? More swagger, not more emotion necessarily, but an edge to his team. The big question is, what would you do on offense? And, I kind of question just hiring Schwartz because it feels maybe a bit too easy. It's the least disruptive, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. But if you're 8-26 over the last 2 seasons, do you need bigger change than just the head coach? And so I think there's a couple ways to look at it. But if he finds the right coordinator on offense to pair with his ready-made defense that's a top 5 unit in the league, you bring it back Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Carson Schlesinger, he's still going to run it. And then you add a bunch of upgrades on offense, starting with a new coach at coordinator, then I could see how it works, right? I didn't like the idea of Schwartz being the head coach and just keeping Tommy Rees, and maybe that's still a possibility. We don't know. But that felt too same to me. The same as 2025. I think you need, if you're going to keep Schwartz, I think you need to make significant changes on the offensive side of the ball, and that could be what they're trying to do with some of these interviews. The Miles quote was regimented and efficient. That's what he thought a Jim Schwartz team would look like, and that, I think that tracks.
When all this went down, I did a little refreshing for myself because I thought, well, Jim's a defensive coordinator type, and that's what his background and everything. What was his offense like in Detroit? And I thought, oh, yes. And it was Matthew Stafford as a rookie.
Yeah.
And then throwing over 700 passes in a season for Matthew Stafford. I thought, well, Jim's not going conservative on the offensive side. He's turning it loose. Second most passes ever thrown by a quarterback in a season. He had Matthew Stafford throw. I wonder what that would look like here with the quarterback situation that we have here, and what a Schwartz hire might mean for the quarterback spot.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, he had Matthew Stafford, he had Calvin Johnson. They're probably losing, trailing a bunch, so that's why you throw it a lot too. I don't get the sense from Schwartz that it would be, you're going to throw it 85 times and, trust your quarterback. There's a defensive mindset that I think he has, and I get what you're saying about what they did in Detroit. That just puts your defense in a tough spot if you're throwing it that many times, right? Yeah. So maybe he's changed since then. Maybe it was all about Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson and trailing a bunch. But I would tend to think that with the offense being in a transition period, and Andrew Berry made that abundantly clear if we didn't already know it, that if they're going to win games next year, it's going to be because their defense is great, their special teams is better, and their offense doesn't hurt the other two units and gives them a chance to win games, right? And maybe it's 2017 or whatever the type of game would be. So I think Schwartz would adapt to that. I think he would lean into Quinshon Judkins, but be well aware that, you got to throw the ball to win it in this league. But I don't think it would be, wide open, run and shoot, try to win games 40-38. That just doesn't fit with, the defensive coordinator mindset.
Scott Petrak, Chronicle Telegram, BrownZone.com, where you can always read him, joining us on the Make It Right, Call Kyle Wright hotline. Doug McDermott, I did it. I tried so hard to not call him Doug McDermott. Sean McDermott do anything for you?
I think he deserves a phone call for sure. I think when that news broke this morning, I happened to be talking to Tom Withers about it, that it changes the dynamic for a bunch of teams in a bunch of ways, where I think you can easily make the argument that he's the best coach available right now, right? And that's because John Harbaugh was already hired, but I think Sean McDermott would fall in line number 2 when you look at everybody who's out there. So if your team with an opening, whether it's the Browns or the Dolphins or the Titans or whoever it is, and there's 8 of them out there, you have to call Sean McDermott, because we've seen what he did in Buffalo. Obviously have never made the Super Bowl, but sustained success, the kind that organizations with coaching openings are looking for. So I think you have to call him. I think it also, on the other hand, opens up another job, and it opens up a really attractive job with the Bills, where if you are Nate Shieldhouse or Mike McDaniel or whoever else the Browns are considering, and every other team in the league, right, the other coaches or candidates that teams are considering across the league, they now would be interested in Buffalo. Because why wouldn't you want to go coach Josh Allen?
Yep.
Right? It just makes too much sense. So I'm not saying this puts everybody on pause. The Browns are still going to go through with their interviews this week, but it certainly adds another dimension, and I think it needs to, for not only the Browns and the teams hiring, but for all those candidates. And I think it could have a ripple effect throughout the league.
Scott Petrak joining us, BrownsZone.com. Go read all of Scott's work. Congratulations, Atlanta Falcons. Congratulations, Kevin Stefanski. You got it done. You got it done quickly. Falcons got their guy, it appears. He was the only guy who interviewed twice from everything I've seen. And congratulations to Kevin, because you struck before other guys had a chance to get in there and do something. What do you think about the fit for Kevin in Atlanta?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Just to go back to that Buffalo point, I do think to myself, would he have wanted to go to Buffalo if he thought that job was going to come open? And I don't know if Buffalo would have interest in him or not, but
and vice versa with Atlanta and Sean McDermott.
Exactly. But you just can't get past the Josh Allen factor, right? Like that's where I keep coming back to. If you're a coach out there, how do you not want to go coach him, right? But put that aside, I think it's a really good landing spot for Kevin. I just posted something that I think the hiring says a lot about Kevin, and I think it says a lot about how the Browns are viewed. That, yeah, he won 8-26 over the last 2 years, and it didn't cause any team to pause about interviewing him or showing interest, and it certainly didn't keep the Falcons from hiring him very quickly, right? So I think teams around the league know how hard it is to win here, and traditionally how hard it's been to win here. Recognize that he did it twice, taking teams to the playoffs, winning 11 games twice, two-time coach of the year, all those things, and that superseded the fact that the wins didn't come in the last 2 years when he had to play 7 quarterbacks and had no receivers and the offensive line was a mess. All those things that we all know, but I think the rest of the league looks at it and his body of work is way more important to them than those last 2 struggling years. And I think it's a good spot for him. Obviously, they got to figure out quarterback. Right? Penix is hurt. His availability for week 1 is in question. I don't know if Kevin likes him or not as a quarterback. He has Kirk Cousins, which feels, familiar to Kevin, and I think he could win with him right away. There's a lot of pieces there, whether it's Bijan Robinson or Drake London. He's got an all-pro guard in Lindstrom. On defense, they got a rookie pass rusher that had 10-plus sacks.
Pierce.
They got two good safeties. They got a corner, Terrell, that's good. So there's some pieces there. Now, Atlanta won 8. I think they won 8 games this year, and it feels like they are always around 7-8 wins. But they haven't had a winning season or been to the playoffs since 2017. So I think the situation is ripe for Kevin to walk in and figure out and have an immediate impact where in a weak division, this team can win 10 games and go to the playoffs, and he'll be instantly loved down there. I just think it's a really good spot for him to walk into.
Scott, it's interesting. I said something similar to what you said. It didn't seem that other teams around the NFL held 8 wins in 2 years against Kevin. And because he was interviewed by so many teams. Why did the Browns hold that against him?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeff. And I think, 4 years from now when we look back, there's going to be a couple of factors that decide whether or not firing Kevin Stefanski was the right move for the Browns. One is if he goes on to have success in Atlanta, then you'll go, was that a mistake? And then 2, it all depends on who the Browns hire. Like the Browns hire a guy that comes in and takes them to the playoffs 3 out of the next 4 years, then nobody's going to say they should have kept Kevin Stefanski, right?
Exactly.
So there's two factors here that determine whether or not this was the right move. But when you ask why they wound up firing him, I do think that Jimmy Haslam got frustrated by the recent losing. I think he took the temperature of the fan base, and there was not a significant movement to keep Kevin. I think there's a lot of frustration and anger with Kevin Stefanski among the fan base. Whether or not that's a right reason to make a move or not, I don't think you can debate that. And then you look across the league, Jeff, like there's 10 coaches got fired this year, or either fired or Mike Tomlin left, right?
Yep.
So the way of the NFL in 2025, 2026 is if it's not working, make a move. And I would tend to argue that that's not the right way to go about this. But I think there's an element that, hey, this is an entertainment business, and my fans are unhappy, or I'm not completely happy, or this generates buzz, whatever it is. The thinking has changed from a decade ago or 15 years ago, where I think, not that everybody was super patient, but it wasn't so easy to just fire a coach. And now that certainly feels to me like that's the way the league is. Well, if you have any question about it, go ahead and make the move. And I just think we've seen that play out in all kinds of different circumstances, and Kevin Stefanski, was one of the victims of that.
Scott Petrak joining us on the hotline. Use your crystal ball, tarot cards, Ouija board, whatever you think you need for this question. How stable of ground is Shedeur Sanders, and how stable is the ground that Dylan Gabriel is standing on for the 2026 season? I
don't think either of them is particularly stable. I don't know what the Browns are going to do quarterback. Is it Mac Jones? Is it Malik Willis? Is it drafting a guy at 6? Is it drafting a guy at 24 in the second round? I think if you brought in a rookie, if you drafted a rookie at 6, which doesn't seem likely right now, but, things change between now and the draft. I don't think you can bring back Shedeur Sanders. I just think it's too much. But if you brought in a Mac Jones or Malik Willis or drafted a Nussmeier, wherever he would be drafted, could you keep Shedeur and have them compete or have him as a backup to the veteran you brought in? I could certainly see that, but I don't think it's guaranteed that Shedeur comes back next year, depending on how the quarterback situation plays out. I think Dylan Gabriel comes back, but I don't see him as a starting quarterback, right? And if you keep Deshaun Watson and you keep Shedeur and you add somebody else, then is Dylan Gabriel guaranteed a roster spot next year? No. So I would not say either guy is on extremely solid footing. I would think Shedeur is definitely on, more stable ground than Dylan, just because he played better. In my eyes, he played better this season than Dylan did.
Scott, got about a minute. Is it just me, or would the Steelers and Ravens be driving to Buffalo to pick up Sean McDermott?
Yeah, I think Baltimore certainly would. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good fit for them. Pittsburgh's interesting because you hear, all they do is hire young defensive coaches. Well, that's over like a 40-year time span. So, and it's 2 guys. So there's not like a long history, right? It's Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin. So they could change it up and go more veteran. The team's more veteran now. So would it stun me if they did? No. But, just in the back of my mind, it's like, Pittsburgh always goes young. And so maybe they would do that. But I don't think we can just point to those 2 guys and say they're automatically going to go young. But I would put Baltimore ahead of Pittsburgh on that Sean McDermott, board.
Last thing. Got about 15 seconds. Timetable on the Browns. They have a coach by the end of the week or no? Because Shieldhouse isn't available.
Yeah, it's Shieldhouse, and if they wanted a second interview with Dirty, that would have to wait too, the Seahawks defensive coordinator. So I think, nobody's told me this, but I think it stretches into next week.
Okay. Thank you, buddy.
All right, go to the garage and practice hitting your Chris Goddard up stingers.
Thanks, bud.
I can't believe how he just tore that course up, Scott. That was unbelievable at the Sony.
Yeah, it was. It was fun.
It was very fun.
Scott, thank you, buddy.
See you.
Scott Petrak, brownzone.com, brownzone.com. And his coverage of the coaching search and everything going on, outstanding.